Okay, cool. So the first agenda item is about the implementation needs. Derek and Malakwan, do you guys want to share this one?
So, we tested the device management system. We had a little bit of a challenge today. So I called Sam. He was checking the issue on the server side. We are hoping to finish the testing for luck so that hopefully we roll out next week or the week after next week. Sorry.
Is it the issue that you guys are not able to register the device? So is it the first time you have this issue, or this issue just continue to happen?
For device management, actually this when I call the developer, sometimes it is sorted. The server side is working okay. When sometimes it is an issue that is coming on and off. So the errors that I documented on the Jira ticket keep repeating. Yes.
Yeah. Just listening.
Okay, so except the issue with registering the device, is there any other issue or things that you want to provide updates with the team?
No, not from no.
Okay, so is it correct that you guys already have a complete list of all those providers and their ID, as well as the locations and their IDs created in the AMR's production? Hey, Malakwan? So just want to check about the status about creating all those CHV, CHWs, user accounts in AMR's production. Are those ready yet? Or if not, when they might be completed?
The users' accounts in AMRS are ready. I sent a list today morning. I CC'd you and Stephen Mashadi.
Okay, so does it include all those that Lawrence requested? Because Lawrence sent like a very extremely long list.
Yes, he sent me. I worked on them yesterday night. So I presume that is a complete list, the one I sent.
Okay, yeah, so from that list, we also need to know which one need to be included in the mobile arm project, because we don't want, we need that subset from the whole list so that we can hard-code it in the specific forms instead of like including all those paper forms providers.
Yes, Ed.
Okay, so that's what we need.
Yes.
So Simon will need that list so before he can update the registration form. Okay.
Yes, right now I'm waiting for the list. I saw the email Malachi sent to Stephen, but as per my argument with Stephen, I need.
Simon, you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. And not anymore, Simon. Simon, in case you're talking, we cannot hear you. So maybe you can use Malaquan's machine to talk, Simon. I don't think we can hear you from your machine.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. What I'm saying, I saw the email Malakwen sent to Stephen, having the list that he has prepared. So as per my earlier agreement with Stephen, he's supposed to counter check the form and send me his final list so that I can update the form. So right now I'm just waiting for him to send me that final list.
Okay, that's great. Except this, is there any other implementation topics you have to discuss? So if not, we suppose. Okay. So Avel, is it correct that you guys are not ready to do a live demo today?
Basically, we were trying to identify the data after setting up the new environment because we didn't want a live data on this demo. So after that, we got some errors that we were not able to actually resolve.
Okay.
So, actually, even now, you cannot see the page that you are used to resolve the error unless we resolve that error that is there first, and then we should be able to see it.
I think maybe we can arrange
so basically,
another.
maybe if we can just walk through the document on the weekend, we ask any questions.
Yeah, so how about you help us just to give us some background about PageCity, just a brief description, because we have some members on the call that they're not very familiar with it. And then after that, it'll be helpful just to walk through the process and the workflow, how you guys triage and resolve the message on the error queue.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so PHCT is a department within AMPATH that does home-based counseling. And for some time, they've been using mobile data collection, basically using ODK Collect, the tool that was developed some time back to do mobile data collection. So when they collect this data is saved into XML files that then we process using a mobile. We have a module within MRS that is called mobile form entry that picks these forms and then processes them into a production. So within this module, within their structure is they collect both household information and patient level information. So what happens is when you go to a household, you collect like the observations or the details about the household that are saved in the database. But again, as you collect this information, you also collect data about the members within the household. So ideally, you have a form for the PHCT will have a section for the household and then a repeating section for members where now you collect data for every member. So when this data comes into when it comes, we collect these forms and then we process using the mobile form entry. Basically, what this mobile form entry does is to split this information into two sets, that is the household level and the patient level. When this is split up, our first, when we're looking at the errors, the first level we look at is if we look at the identifiers for the household, we confirm that the household is valid, it has appropriate identifiers. Basically, then it has the GPS. Then once this household is not actually been processed before, we will process the data. We now go ahead and process the data for the household, after which we will now associate the members of the household. That's after splitting up the form. Basically, I've said we split this form into two. We have the household level and the patient level. So the processing happens at twofold, whereby once you process the household, then you will pick each and every member of the household and then process the data, looking at whether the patient exists, whether there is some information, something has changed. Because for PHCT, if you go to the field, one thing that happens is you can go to the field with a mobile device, you collect household information. Then after some time, maybe you don't complete, you realize maybe some members are not there. And then you go back the second day to complete this information. But when you come in the first time, you collected this information, it has been saved like incomplete. So you have like maybe 5 members of the household. The following day you go and finish up on the remaining 2. So when you process this data using the mobile form entry, what happens is the module will check and figure out whether this information, the household exists. If it exists, it will look at the differential, whether there is additional information that has been added, and this additional information now will be merged into the previous household. So at least you have that feature where you can collect today and then go back and come back, put in additional information. Actually, during this process, PHCT does not have access to the live data of the patient. Basically, they normally, when they are going to the field, they print out the household identifiers as well as the patient identifiers. When they collect this information, then they don't have like maybe the previous information about the patient accessible using that mobile device.
Yeah, so Avril, can I just ask one quick question here? So what if they collect new some demographic data about a client that he or she already exists in the system, but then the demographic data that you guys collected on the field is different from what's in the database. How do you guys handle that?
Yeah, because we have a matching, we look at the identifiers. So basically, there are 2 ways. If the demographic information is different from what is in the database, the error solution page will flag this patient as, maybe we say we have a different patient with the same details exist, because we look at the demographics, the date of birth, the names, and other things. So when you find such a scenario, we'll just put in the error queue. Then we'll have someone, we have a process where now, like the data manager or someone with the appropriate privileges will come in and either change this or allow the details to be merged.
So actually, there is a processor to catch those cases that when it claims it's a new client, but then the system found that it's already have maybe the ID already exists in the system, and then it will put in the error queue, and it will require a manual review process to resolve them. Is it correct?
Yes, correct.
Thanks.
Any other question?
Not for me now. Thanks. Go ahead.
So once we process this and we relate this, we have various levels of errors that we normally get, and majorly, most of these errors we have, like the page for resolving errors has appropriate mechanism, maybe for if you find maybe a patient, the provider maybe is not incorrect that has been specified, we have a process for giving him a new provider. If you found the identifier is invalid, you can give a new identifier. So if you have duplicates, actually also track duplicates. If you find you processed and you realize there are two patients with the same identifiers, this happens because we said when you are going to the field, you don't have access to the real information of the patient. Basically, you have printed out the sheets, and at times the counselors would give would scan a same identifier for two patients. So those cases exist. We have scenarios where patients come in and they have different names from what they registered with, because maybe when they go, one is sometimes they give you different names, maybe typing errors, maybe mostly typing errors, and sometimes they actually change because there are patients who doesn't want to be identified. So they give different names to different people. And so we have that process of resolving those.
Yeah, so can you just describe a bit more the process when you collect, the same clients have conflicting demographic data? What is the process you guys take to resolve them?
Sorry, come again, please.
So when, just like the example you mentioned earlier, I just wonder if you can describe the process, the steps. Let's say that the same client appear to have different demographic data, but they are the same person. What is the process you guys take currently to resolve it?
That I think is built in there. I may not remember very well, but I believe that should be when they are. I haven't opened that page. I wish I had. Basically, there should be a process where you could.
Yeah. Is it the patient the record merge page? You mean?
Sorry.
Like there's two records side by side, and then to have the demographic side by side, and then you say, oh, I want this view, or keep this view, or merge, keep
Because
this as
normally the new patient is the one that is flagged, and then we also tell you with the existing patient, like we say, we have the two names printed out. You are saying James in the database, James O already exists with this identifier and this potentially merging, and then we are the new coming in, maybe James OK is. And so now you look at the two patients and you should be able to decide whether they are matches or you need to create a new patient out of the new record that is coming in for you to resolve that error.
Okay, thanks. So what do you, just a question, how do you feel about the current workflow and also the UI in the current setup for PCT to resolve these the error queue messages, and also some of the record might be questionable and need investigation? I just wonder if you can share some of your opinion. What's the pros and cons of the current setup?
Yeah, maybe mostly this is because the process actually requires manual intervention, and it's a good because now at least someone is able to tell to go in.
You are on mute, Raphael.
I think I would say for most part, this error resolution process has been they've been raising issues here and there and being able to resolve. But what I was saying, given that this is a manual intervention and there's no really maybe a better way of maybe if we were to do maybe because this error is coming like error by error, if there were a way of maybe grouping these errors into possible solutions so that when the counselors are resolving this, they can also look at that. Although basically as well you can search. Maybe I don't have much of the problems. Maybe I may need to think through it again, look at it and see whether I can find something that.
Mhm. Okay. So Win has a question on the chat, asking how would it be to migrate the error resolution that's currently in place? Is it tied to a specific structure that ODK use or granular enough that we can customize it? This is more like mUzima, based on the current.
I think it's partly tied to the structure that ODK uses, but we may be able to modify it because you realize the processing and the error resolution are the processing of data and error resolution go hand in hand. So perhaps we can look at it and see what can be modified. I don't think it will be so hard for us to modify this.
Anyone have any other comment or questions? So Win has a question. Is it inside the mobile form entry module?
Yeah, it is within the mobile form entry module.
So does it tell you give you like a statistics to categorize what type of error they are and how many they are?
Not really. Okay, you can basically it does grouping of errors, but it has just when you look at the page for error resolution, it has a column for the error type, which you can use. You can potentially use to group them, but it is not like giving you like statistics of maybe. Of,
Are you still there, Rafael? I'm not sure if you guys can hear Rafael, but I cannot hear him.
I can hear you guys.
So let me just. Okay, Rafael, we cannot hear you in case you're talking. No, Wayne, we cannot hear you either. I think I have the same problem with my Mac. I have to restart my machine in order to have my mic work.
Either we can hear you. Me, I can hear you from this side. I don't know, maybe it's connectivity to the other side, to the other guys. Thanks.
Yeah, I think they got dropped off. They should be back. So maybe while we're waiting for them to be back, maybe I just want to share the. Nope, they're back. Okay. Yeah, me too. When I have the same questions, just wonder. So, Avel, you are back. Your mic is on mute. Just I need to unmute it.
that was the question that you had asked. I think we don't have the history. Maybe you can, someone can paste. Okay.
So we were just wondering if you have a sense of what is the most frequent errors that you guys encounter so far.
Okay, maybe let me figure out that we had actually sometime last year when we did the processing, we documented these errors and we were actually categorizing them. It may not be on top of my head, but I think there was a ticket PHCT error resolution that we actually, when we processed this data, we were actually giving a breakdown of the errors that we were getting when we were processing the data into production. So perhaps we could could open that and see whether we can find some figures.
Okay. So I just wonder if other people have other comments or questions. Okay, so I just want to share the screen right now how our mUzima RQ UI look like. It's a little bit improvement from the original the first one we have, but then it just helped us to kind of like put a little bit more metadata about what the error message is, and then kind of like categorize them, where this message come from, and then when it was submitted or processed on, and also the type of the error. So when we look through like a specific one, just displayed by individual error message on this UI, it tells you saying that, hey, we are unable to process this queue data because this client actually don't exist with this ID. So that means that we don't have the patient record on in the system, and then but they fill out an encounter form, and that's why they don't know where to process this message and send this encounter to. But we need to have like improvement on UI. That we just want to know, like for example, like on the current setup in PHCT, how would this, like a message like this, how would the UI look like right now? So Raphael, like something like this, how do you guys how is the current setup look like in PHCT?
So basically, we have we normally have like the error type, and then we extract the identifier. Oh yeah, it looks like what we have. You have the sender, the kind, submitted on. So maybe the error type that like unable to process queue data. And okay, to find user using this. Yeah, so this one would be like this would be the type of error. And then
so when I would suggest, like one suggestion here is that instead of like user unable to find user using this ID, can we say unable to find provider ID, this one? I think because sometimes the user is not necessarily the provider. Sometimes it is, sometimes not. Maybe we just need to rephrase that because it could be confusing sometimes. Okay, cool. So let me just put another example just to see here. So pretty much it's all about the provider IDs don't exist. I think I also want to bring up that some challenges I see when people submit the form and then it go to error queue is that when the user log in as a non-provider, and because the user doesn't have the provider roles assigned, and it also should we add another layer of validation, or to make sure that if the user, because we have a feature to say that we can set the login user as a defaulted provider. I think that option needs to add another check and validation. If the login user doesn't have a provider role assigned, we should not even have that option to be enabled, so that we can also eliminate another set of possible error. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm just reading the comment. So Shrita has a question. Can you show the error queue that you guys work with? And then Martin says he's happy to drop off. It has some patient level data which should not be shown here, but we can show some. We can create some test data, and we can share that. Okay, cool. So I think we need to take notes on adding another validation to avoid non-provider role users to set themselves as defaulted incumbent provider. So I just want you guys to take a look at just this page. I would like some suggestions from you guys, and some suggestions how you guys think that we should revise it. What I have in mind is to categorize the error message type, this column here, and then group them by error type, and then also give kind of like a summary, so that we have a sense of what type of error is happen more frequent than the other, so that we can prioritize our resources to fix those first. Except those, is there any other suggestions that you think it will be helpful for us to be included on this page?
I think for the other one, we also had the exception thrown, it's hidden, but when we are looking at this error, you could expand the error exception so that you could expand. Okay, I'm just saying under the error message, maybe you could also add the exception that one received when they were processing this, whether that has been done for the page CT, so that you can see the actual exception that was thrown, but normally it is hidden when you want, then you can look at it.
Do you mean like this box here?
This is the date.
So the reason this message got thrown as exception because the provider ID is cannot be found.
The provider ID cannot. Okay, basically, I was just thinking, this is the message, like this is the data that you have. This is someone can look at the form data and see this is what he has. The message type is fine, but I'm thinking of an additional maybe column where you store the actual normally when it's being processed, when you get an error, most likely there will be like an exception through the Java code that is thrown. So I see. If we do that, maybe it might take a lot of space in your database.
Okay.
I've seen. I don't know whether it was in. I think one of our error handling process has that. I don't know whether it's mobile form entry or the HL7 error queue. I think one has.
Yeah, I think I saw that too. I think it's the HL7 error queue table. Yeah. So Shrita has some questions. Shrita, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, hi Dan, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
So, forgive me if some of my questions are very basic because the PHCT and the team and the work that you are doing is a little new to us. So, just wanted to understand is one of the action items that we're trying to discuss over here is basically to understand how error handling is done in PHCT, and you'll want to basically make the whole error handling process a little more easier and more intuitive to the user so that the user will be able to um, process and go through all the errors reported in a quicker fashion. Is that what we're trying to do?
You want to respond?
I think they're discussing. Rafael, you're on mute in case you're talking.
Yeah, maybe I thought maybe this presentation was basically for us to look at what PHCT has done and perhaps learn a few things from it and to advise our process of creating or whether we can use this to improve on the mUzima error resolution process that is in design.
Okay.
And I don't know whether there was any other, but that was my thought when I was coming to this meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
So, anyone have more suggestions on improving what information that we should include it in the error message queue, and also any suggestions of how the feature should be? Let's say that I'm just making it up. For this case, let's say that the provider ID, I cannot find this provider ID. What should be next?
Okay, Eda, I think apart from just reporting and categorizing the error messages, maybe we should think of a way of providing the UI for resolving those errors in place.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
For example, if there is a conflict in the MRS universal ID used, maybe we can allow somebody to select the payload, maybe to click somewhere and some form is displayed so that the user can provide a new UI, a new MRS ID and submit the data for processing. So maybe we should look at some of the things that can be resolved in place. We see how to design the interface so that the users can resolve them there, Ron. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I agree with you. So I think we need to list out the possible different types of errors, and then from there, and then drill down to even more detail to say that let's say that when we have situations saying that duplicate ID, existing ID already in the system, so what would be the next step? And if saying that incorrect ID, and then what's the next step? Because the UI and the actions, would depends on what type of error first. That's why we're interested in knowing from PHCT, what type of errors they have, and then what, how the current setup are, so that we can reference to it and maybe even add more improvement for ours.
Ada?
Go ahead.
Yeah, while that is a very good idea, but since my understanding is mUzima is a kind of a very general platform, so although we can learn from PHCT, but I think the kind of errors in what we do in PHCT is very specific to that program. Yeah, so we can't really, I don't really think it's a good idea to just go ahead and maybe take whatever is being done in PHCT and apply it in mUzima.
No,
Just to make it,
not exactly take everything from PCT. It's just like to reference to it, so that we have something to reference to see how the current UIs and resolution look like, so that it helps us with our design.
yeah, right. So another thing is, I think the workflow. I mean, is this error resolution in mUzima going to depend on the workflow, or is it? Are we just discussing about the UI and what is going to be displayed and whether the user should be able to edit the payload or not?
I think pretty much both. We want to come up with like a UI design for the resolutions, and also for the implementations, we also need to provide the suggestion what's the process of resolving them.
Oh, and you think that process is not determined by the kind of data and program that is using the platform? I mean, can it be that generic?
When you think about it, that's why we want to know like what are the general categories of the errors. So from there, they are pretty generic when you think about it, because usually it's the patient ID or existing records, or the provider IDs, or the entire location ID. Those are the most common ones that I can think of. There might be some other ones that we're not aware of. That's why we want to take a look at what PHCD has, since it's been ongoing for years. So why not just learn from the lessons, so that we can take advantage of that.
Ada, I think you have to distinguish between structural errors and content-based errors. Technically, if a system has actually gone live, there should be no structural errors. There's not going to be a lot to learn from the fact that somehow the program allowed a encounter to be submitted without a location. That's just a flaw in the underlying, that's a bug in the underlying program. For PHCT in particular, I'm just very concerned that we do not understand the general workflows of how data is collected. And this needs to be documented in a very explicit fashion. And then there's the separate side of just testing out forms as they're created to see if they're actually being submitted properly, and if there are possibilities that arise where the form gets submitted without required data. So it seems like we're being a little premature by discussing UI designs for error resolution, but we don't really seem to have a good handle of what's generating the errors in the first place. As you know, this is an ongoing project with the PHCT team, so we're going in the same direction. But I think Alfio seems to have a bit of knowledge on this, and I'm not even sure who in PHCT does this work. But somehow we have to first set up a fairly specific line of what's going on. Then we can document the types of problems that are arising with it, meaning the errors that are being created. And then we can start thinking about the fixes for these things.
Those are good suggestions, TJ. I don't think we have the structural errors that I see. Most of them is related to data.
I'm not looking at the errors, but I don't when you say it's data errors, do you mean that people are submitting OBS, basically, that are somehow invalid?
No, it's more like because like on the mobile device, we can, for example, we cannot load everyone into the local repo. Let's say that. So we have only like a selected cohort list of clients and demographic data on the device. So the user, we also have an option that to allow user to search the server in real time in case they cannot find the clients on the local repo. Let's say that somehow there's no Wi-Fi connection or no internet connection. So they just go ahead and create a record as a new client. So when that new registration, the registration form sent to the server for processing, because of we can catch that, hey, this ID or this client actually have an existing record. We need a way of resolving them. So not just to look at the ID, but also need to look at other metadata. So we can improve in terms of using the patient matching algorithm in a sense for this process. Right now, we just use like very simple matching algorithm right now. So
rather than doing this server side, which is what it sounds like you guys are doing, it seems to me to make a lot more sense to have a client side mechanism, such that when you're describing a process where people are creating new users without first checking to see if they're on the system. So they can be allowed to do that, but once they come back online, something on the client side has to verify, okay, and then report back to the user if there's a conflict when it comes to identifiers. I don't know about how you're going to do patient matching, because it sounds like the other use case is a patient gets created mistakenly, even though they already exist. At some point in time, when the patient gets when the data gets submitted from the client to the server has a close enough match that it suspects that this patient already does exist. The question is how do you resolve that? So either you could put the patient matching, you could somehow make it some sort of a call that the client could go to the server to first verify whether this patient is suspected of being a duplicate. Or I guess you could do it on the server side and let somebody else resolve the error. And it sounds like you've gone with the second way, which I think makes sense, because probably the patient matching stuff is not set up to send REST calls to and get responses back. So I guess that's two different errors that we've now described. And I guess for that latter case, yeah.
Could I just make a comment on what you just said?
Yeah.
I think the issue is connectivity and the reliability of it. So ideally, if you're connected, then you should be able to do some potential real-time patient matching on the phone. But more often than not, we have to be able to accommodate a situation where we will not be connected real-time to the server.
Right. So for that case that you're describing, you would save the data locally, and then send there would be two ways to go. You could either then have the client make a call to the server to check whether that data exists for another patient. The server returns possible matches. The second thing would be to just say, let's not ask the user, the PHCT counselor, to be responsible for doing patient matching. We'll just send it to the server, and then we'll keep a queue of people who are possible duplicates. Is it the latter that you're planning to do?
So let me ask a question. I think somewhat of how well do we think multiple people out there trying to do patient matching against our system? Do you think that's a better way of doing it, or do you think patient matching should be done by a few people in Central who kind of understand the processes that are in place? Because remember, once you match, you're talking about, well, create this new person or merge duplicate data, okay, or merge duplicate individuals. How about if you get some people in the field who are just merging stuff that really shouldn't be merged,
Well, this isn't a merge in this case. It's simply asking, does this patient exist? It's just doing the patient matching retrospectively, since you weren't online that you created the patient, which had you been online, you would have done some sort of patient matching checking. But I don't know what the answer is. One, I don't know how many patients are being created. I can tell you that right now we have 600,000 patients in AMRS, and apparently 300,000 of them are thought to be duplicates. So my concern is that by just pushing this off to the server, we're just continuing a very, very big problem.
Yeah,
so
so
could I make sure I understand, and then I'll keep quiet. So right now in mUzima, what we do is, we have some lightweight matching on the device, which could potentially be improved. But if we don't have someone, you're allowed to ping the server if you're connected and match them and get a result back of potential matches. Isn't that what we do in mUzima right now? Maybe Win and Eda can comment on that. I think that's the way it works. So we might, is that still a lightweight search even on the server right now? And maybe that search needs to be improved. But in mUzima right now, you have the ability to ping the server to get some potential matches on the client, and before you start registering them.
That's correct.
Am I missing something?
Yeah, so the workflow is usually like the device is off, from the internet connection, but then they can also search the server in real time to see whether the record exists or not. If it is, they can just pull and download, and then they can continue with the encounter and data collection.
Okay. Well, look, I know we only have a few minutes left, and the purpose of this meeting wasn't to figure out some of these more specific cases, but and I apologize if this already exists, but a list of these types of workflows that we're describing, is this documented?
So we can share with you the our current features and all these things that we include that saying that it allowed to search the server in real time for the patient record. Yes, it's documented. JJ, do you have other comments or questions?
right. No. Yeah. That's what I thought.
Can you guys hear me?
Sure.
Now I can.
Okay. So basically, we want to. The reason is like we don't want to put, like we don't want to have all these, too much burdens on the actual providers on the mobile side. That's why when they send like a record saying that hey, it's possible or they exist in the server after they do the synchronizations, we want it to be more like triage and resolved on the server side by more experienced or trained personnel instead of putting the burden back to the CHW and CHV use because it's already quite challenging for them to actually to learn and use the mobile device application. Okay, so Martin just shared the summary that we have from the CDM program. 59 of the cases are test patients, and 90 of them saying that identifier is already in use. 5 of them saying that no provided, the provider ID is not correct.
Yeah, no, I see these, Ada. This is very helpful. How is it even possible that there can be a patient with no provider, with no identifier, or with an invalid encounter type? How is that possible?
Yeah, no, it seems like it's more of a form-related issue. In fact, I've asked my lab to just dig deeper. So if you have a form, for example, and that form at the very end asks the provider, please, give us a sense of which provider filled this form, okay? Ideally, you should just inject whoever is logged on at that time. But if it's, let's say, a free text type of field, you'll end up with them putting in some numbers that potentially don't make sense. So some of these things to me, might be form-related issues, meaning the form might need to be redesigned. Some of it might be just, people following the wrong processes, like you shouldn't be putting test patients on a production type of server, and then some of them could actually be true errors. Let's say somebody has another ID, or they've used the same ID number. So I think when we get these types of errors, first understanding exactly what you said, JJ, is how do you end up with these errors goes a long way towards understanding how to resolve, but also how to avoid the errors from happening in the future. Does that help?
So
It says there's 59 patients, but the identifier already in use 90 times. Does that mean that there's more than one encounter per patient?
no, it's saying that 59 error messages actually are test. They're just doing the test patient. It's just like for testing purpose. And then, they have like hundreds of messages already processed. This is just like the summary of different type of error, and then 59 of them is just like test patients, so that we don't need to worry about it, so that they can just remove that.
Yeah. So to me, this is the type of thing that, if you have an implementer and a data manager, resolving, getting to the roots of these problems and saying, how exactly is it that we're getting identifier already in use? Remember Malak, when actually I sent a specific email saying we need to go through each of these and just outline what could be causing them, and then what potential solutions there are, because some of those can be implemented in the error resolution, and some of them can be implemented on the forms, and some of them can be implemented from a protocol standpoint.
Yeah.
And having looked at those, I've also checked the errors in the PCT. I think these actually represent like the categorization of our errors as well, because majority of the errors are related to identifiers, actually most of it. So they are either shared or the invalid check digits, although this checking has been done, but you realize for some time maybe for PHCT, I would say this would be happening because like you have invalid check digits for identifiers, basically because some of the identifiers that when we create the form, some of them they tell us not to validate because they already have some identifiers or patients with identifiers that had not been validated before. So actually, it would be very good for mUzima to have a very good process of validation for the identifiers and maybe checking whether they are in use, because actually most of them are good.
I agree that if we could get the comprehensive list of errors from PHCP and obviously prioritized by frequency, it will really just help, because each of those errors might have different types of workflows. Maybe you guys already discussed that.
So I will say that they do categorize or group different type of errors, but they don't have like a frequency for those.
Okay, even sharing that list would help. Okay.
Where are these errors? Where are you getting these from?
Are you talking about PHCT or are you talking about CDM?
Either one. I just want to know: is this in a table in OpenMRS?
So for the CDM one, you can look at the mUzima error queue table.
Okay.
For PHCP, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not worried about PHCT right now. That's a process. But these are in the mUzima error queue. So basically what happens is that mUzima tries to submit, I'm guessing through REST, and then if REST returns an error, it gets logged with the error that REST reports. Is that right?
Yeah, it will be put in the error queue because it doesn't, it has some issues, so that it needs to be.
But is it through REST?
I think so. Win, correct? Win just stepped out. Sorry.
We lost him. Okay, we can figure that out later. I gotta go too.
Something.
Hey, John,
It should be true. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Jonathan, just wanted to just let you know that mUzima and there's a sort of a handler which basically turns on the form, and I think the error shows up only on processing the form. So the rest part is only for the submission. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you a little better.
Okay, so just wanted to just point out that mUzima actually submits the forms to the server, and the form data gets queued up in a mUzima queue. And
Okay.
there are different kinds of handlers based on the types of forms, and the handlers process the form data, and they try, for example, if it's a new patient that we're I was just trying to clarify your question on the rest part. Can you hear me?
Yes, now.
So mUzima basically tries to submit forms to the server, and all of the form data that comes in into a queue. And there are different kinds of handlers for each kind of form. And basically, the handler tries to process the data that has been submitted to the server, and that's when these errors show up. For the registration of a new patient, for whatever reason, if someone's trying to register a patient who's already been registered, that's when you will get an error which calls out that this is a duplicate registration. I am sorry, I don't know if you guys can hear me well. Yeah, so the rest part is basically just, we do have REST calls, but the error that you're seeing is basically happening only after processing the form.
Okay. So you're so the errors that you're logging are mUzima. They're the errors that you're creating yourselves then.
Can you please repeat that?
The errors are pre-submission, so they're not rejections from OpenMRS. They're problems that you anticipated and then are logging potential problems.
No, these are actually post-submission, but this actually happens before you successfully save the data that.
No, but when I'm using submission to mean that you've entered them into OpenMRS.
Yeah, before you save to OpenMRS, for whatever reason you've got a bunch of crappy data that can't be saved. That's when the handler logs the error. So the errors that you're seeing on the mUzima queue are because the handlers have flagged them.
Yeah. Okay. And do you have a list of all of the errors that you're looking? Because basically you're looking for errors. It sounds like you first try to do a registration. I don't know what else you're doing, but at least that one that will raise potential errors, and then you log them. So do you have a list of those the error checking that you're doing?
No, not really.
Okay. Could we make one?
Yeah, we could. So what I just wanted to just go back, well, I think earlier on the call you were talking about two ways of how we can prevent data, erroneous or error-prone data from entering the server. Is we either do a client-side check or we don't do client-side check and we just let the data go even if it's wrong, and then the server flags it as an error. I think given the way that we've made a very core assumption in mUzima that not all of the providers have internet connectivity all the time, and that's probably why we chose the second way of doing it, because it's not possible to check all the time if this particular patient has been registered. So I think we just let it.
I don't. I think something's being confused though, because you can, you're able to wait on the client side till you have internet connection and requests. Just because you're checking in on the client side doesn't mean that you have to have constant internet connection.
Yeah, but no. So you still have to create the client, or at least a temporary demographic for the client,
right?
Before you can even start using
exactly
information.
Exactly. So you'd save it, and then when you regain connection, then you would do your check. It doesn't. Yeah. I'm sure the way that you did it is fine. I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah. So we actually spoke about this at length. Okay. So the question is, what artifact do you give the client after they leave? Okay. So if you're registering people on the field, or at least collecting the demographic information in the field, you can decide as a program, we are not giving them anything if we are not connected, okay? And then we wait until we get connected and we decide to go to the houses and try to find them, okay? So to me, it's more of a logistics and policy decision than a development decision, because you could go with it either way.
Mm-hmm. Right. But Jonathan, I see what you are saying. If you anyway are going to make the REST call to submit, just before you actually submit, when you come back online, you do the quick check. So you prevent the error data from ever hitting the server.
I think, Shweta, I think that is very challenging, because the thing is, for example, for the case of patient matching, when the user is trying to match the patient, actually they're checking against the possible matches, so they have a list of people where they can say, okay, I think this is a person. Now, I don't think it's very feasible to tell the users to, again, sit down and trying to see for whatever they've already created, to see whether they have matches and then try to resolve that. I guess it's like what Martin has said, it's more like a logistic decision. What would be the best solution depending on the type of people you're deploying on the field.
Right. And the other thing,
I guess my issue is just that basically what we're saying is we're going to figure it out later. And based on the history that I see, I don't know if that's been a good way of doing things. It may be that it's worth sacrificing doing data collection in the field in order to make sure we have a better identification of the people we're entering it on.
Yeah, Jonathan, I think what you're saying, I mean, this kind of decision, the kind of decision which you make by making trade-offs. Like, I mean, you consider all these scenarios and you say, okay, I think maybe this is the best way.
Yeah.
Depending on all other parameters, because it's not only about coding. It's possible, of course, to, like what Shweta said, to make a risk call and see whether this patient is there or not. But I remember sometime back with this discussion, we saw that it's very difficult if you have these gray areas to make a decision based on programmatically. It means you need the human intervention, and when you need that, it depends on the skills, or the skills that are possessed by the people in the field. Now, do you really think you have people who are skilled enough to make those decisions? Do you really want them to make those decisions, or is it better just to defer the decision to be done later on the server? So you have all these factors, and then you have to make the decision which is the best approach to use. I guess that's why.
Right. And what I totally agree with you, Will. All I'm saying is that the approach that that was decided, it sounds more like decided by PHCT, is a bad one. It just did not work. So we could either keep doing it and keep saying let them register patients, assuming that we're moving them to mUzima, which I think is kind of part of what this discussion is, or we have to revise this way of registering how we allow people to get created, because it's a real disaster right now.
So I have a basic question right now, like, why is it that we need so much of manual intervention to recognize if this particular patient has already been registered or some kind of why is it like that? I just to understand how the system works.
No, I think it's a great question, and I think the problem is that none of us are, we've kind of inherited this program, and we don't really know why they've made so many mistakes so often. My suspicion is that they made so many mistakes because nobody, after month 1, right now we're like in month 5 or something, year 5, but after month 1 they should have been going through it and identifying these problems and then training and correcting. Instead, and sat. So I'm not saying that we need to change the way that we're doing our software side of things, but our software side of things is not helping the situation. And I'm hesitant to continue doing it this way if we're going to continue to have this many duplicates. So it might just mean that the tools that we really need are some sort of reporting mechanism that shows this error queue on a monthly basis, and then we have a workflow for going back into the field for correcting it.
Yeah, just to put things into perspective, I think part of the reason. Can you hear me, guys?
Yep.
Yeah, I think part of the reason is because we have different programs doing different things independently. And then at the end of the day, you want to aggregate all this information from these programs together in a single system. Now, when you have that kind of a situation, it's very difficult to know. And I mean, also taking into consideration that in this area, people kind of have very similar names and the demographic information. So when you want to merge, you can't really rely on you could. I mean, there are some things that are 100% match, but you have a very large number of people who are falling in the gray area. And that's why you need manual intervention, because you can't really tell the program how to merge those type of patients. And that's why you have that kind of a situation.
Yeah.
So, I hope that helps better.
I think that just as we think about this, because it seems like we're in a design phase right now, part of the question is not just... Part of the thing is not just to list the errors, but we need workflows for resolving the errors that aren't just a person has to merge to look at a few different patients. There's another big step that we're missing, which is how do we prevent them from happening in the first place, which is what I apologize if I'm saying your name wrong, but Shweta is saying, alluding to, I should say.
So your points are well taken, and I think this is a discussion we need to have internally at AMPAC, okay? But I can guarantee you each of the approaches has its pros and cons, and it's going to just be a matter of balancing out as a program what we think makes sense, okay? So we've gone through this discussion before, so it's not like we came to this conclusion without considering the pros and cons of the other approaches. So I think we can sit back and have a discussion again. But I think you realize very fast that as long as you're collecting data for people in the field and you're not giving them any IDs or any numbers because you can't ping the central server, and you're in the community, and then after 3-4 days you have to go back and find these people, it can actually get logistically complicated. So we just have to weigh what makes sense within our setting and what the potential harms of taking one approach versus the other.
Agreed.
Yeah. Now you could imagine a generic system should be able to let the user decide, which ones of those approaches work for their setting. Okay. So if somebody is in Tanzania, they might decide the second approach works better than the first. So the system eventually should be able to accommodate both approaches. But given that our first implementation is
So, sorry guys, the call's making is past the call time. Let's just continue another time for these discussions. But thanks for everyone. I think great suggestions.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. To me, kind of thinking about this now through this conversation is that the issue is we don't so much need an interface to do resolution. I mean, yes, that is good, but we need something to let somebody manage errors who's not doing it through software. Somebody who, a simple report that describes the type of problems we're having and then provides some way of monitoring this over time. Because you're right, we're never going to solve this issue as long as we're allowing people to offline create patients. We're never going to be able to protect against incorrectly created or duplication of patients. But it's the follow-up that needs to be. I think there's a software solution to that as well.
Well, but I think, JJ, either way, if you have a payload with patient data and it's going to an error queue, it needs to be resolved so that that data can make it into the system, right? And if it's very difficult for people to resolve that error once it occurs, because you have to go to the back end or you need to kind of write some queries to do it, it makes it very difficult to actually get the data from the field into the system. So one way or the other, beyond reporting at a very high level, the things that make it to the error queue have to be resolved so that that data can be available for use.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that I disagree. I just think that the problem really needs to start with why are the errors happening in the first place, and not just a software solution to resolving them. I think a lot of them are going to be too hard to solve.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. So, I mean, if you say look at the test patient data, that's not a software issue, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you shouldn't be putting test patients in a production server, right? So I think we all agree that you have to look at the root causes of the errors first. But once you have the errors, you still have to resolve them, whether it's deleting them, like the test patients, and making sure people are trained not to enter test patients anymore into the system. And then the ones that need a programmatic solution can be resolved programmatically. But not just from experience, looking even at the payload we have on the screen right now, it's very difficult for an untechnical person to figure out how to resolve this. And it's maybe simply that the ID is missing or something to that effect.
Okay.
I think basically we all agree that we need to prevent, the error message in the first place, but there's need to have like URS resolve them for like non-programmer users, like without going to the database to update the SQL in the data in the database. So that's pretty much what we're trying to aim for. At the same time, I think we go ahead. Yeah. At the same time, of course, we would love to know like how we can prevent the data error data in the first place. So. I think we are on the same page. Any more comments or before we wrap this up? Cool. Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah, thanks everyone for participating too. It was helpful for me.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.